However, even at their peak, their restrictions on Jews in the United States were never as stringent as they had been in Europe. 179. In the Zidiamamate of Yemen, Jews were also singled out for discrimination in the 17th century, which culminated in the general expulsion of all Jews from places in Yemen to the arid coastal plain of Tayamar, and which became known as the Morza exile. 180. Enlightenment. In 1744, Archduchess of Austria Maria Theresa ordered Jews out of Bohemia, but soon reversed her position, on the condition that Jews pay for their readmission every 10 years. This extortion was known among the Jews as Malkgeld, Queen's money in Yiddish. 181. In 1752, she introduced the law limiting each Jewish family to one son. In 1782, Joseph II abolished most of these persecution practices in his tolerance patent, on the condition that Yiddish and Hebrew were eliminated from public records and that judicial autonomy was annulled. Moses Mendelssohn wrote that such a tolerance is even more dangerous play intolerance than open persecution. Voltaire. According to Arnold Ages, Voltaire's Lettres philosophiques, Dictionnaire philosophique, and Candide, to name but a few of his better-known works, are saturated with comments on Jews and Judaism, and the vast majority are negative. 182. Paul H. Mayer adds, there is no question but that Voltaire, particularly in his latter years, nursed a violent hatred of the Jews, and it is equally certain that his animosity did have a considerable impact on public opinion in France. 183. 30 of the 118 articles in Voltaire's Dictionnaire philosophique concerned Jews and described them in consistently negative ways. 184. Louis de Bonald and the Catholic Counter-Revolution. The counter-revolutionary Catholic royalist Louis de Bonald stands out among the earliest figures to implicitly call for the reversal of Jewish emancipation in the wake of the French Revolution. 185. 186. Bonald's attacks on the Jews are likely to have influenced Napoleon's decision to limit the civil rights of Alsatian Jews. 187, 188, 189, 190. Bonald's article Sur les Juifs, 1806, was one of the most venomous creeds of its era and furnished a paradigm which combined anti-liberalism, a defensive, a rural society, traditional Christian antisemitism, and the identification of Jews with bankers and finance capital, which would in turn influence many subsequent right-wing reactionaries such as Roger Galgenot des Museaux, Charles Maurras, and Edouard Roumont, nationalists such as Maurice Barres and Paulo Orano, and antisemitic socialists such as Alphonse Tissanel. 185, 191, 192. Bonald furthermore declared that the Jews were an alien people, a state within a state, and should be forced to wear a distinctive mark to more easily identify and discriminate against them. 185, 193. Under the French Second Empire, the popular counter-revolutionary Catholic journalist Louis Vuillot propagated Bonald's arguments against the Jewish financial aristocracy along with vicious attacks against the Talmud and the Jews as a dicidal people driven by hatred to enslave Christians. 194, 193. Between 1882 and 1886 alone, French priests published 20 antisemitic books blaming France's ills on the Jews and urging the government to consign them back to the ghettos, expel them, or hang them from the gallows. 193. Galgenot des Museaux as le Juif, le judaïsme et la judaisation des peuples chrétiens, 1869, has been called a Bible of modern antisemitism and was translated into German by Nazi ideologue Alfred Rosenberg. 193. Imperial Russia. Thousands of Jews were slaughtered by Cossack Haidamaks in the 1768 massacre of Uman in the Kingdom of Poland. In 1772, the Empress of Russia Catherine II forced the Jews into the Pale of Settlement, which was located primarily in present-day Poland, Ukraine, and Belarus, and to stay in their shtetls, and forbade them from returning to the towns that they occupied before the partition of Poland. From 1804, Jews were banned from their villages and began to stream into the towns. 195. A decree by Emperor Nicholas I of Russia in 1827 conscripted Jews under 18 years of age into the Cantonist schools for a 25-year military service in order to promote baptism. 196. Policy towards Jews was liberalized somewhat under Tsar Alexander II, R1855-1881. 197. However, High's assassination in 1881 served as a pretext for further repression, such as the May Laws of 1882. Konstantin Pobedonostsev, nicknamed the Black Tsar and tutor to the Tsarevich, later crowned Tsar Nicholas II, declared that 1/3 of the Jews must die, 1/3 must emigrate, and 1/3 be converted to Christianity. 198. Islamic antisemitism in the 19th century. Historian Martin Gilbert writes that it was in the 19th century that the position of Jews worsened in Muslim countries. Benny Morris writes that one symbol of Jewish degradation was the phenomenon of stone throwing at Jews by Muslim children. Morris quotes a 19th century traveler: "I have seen a little fellow of 6 years old, with a troop of fat toddlers of only 3 and 4, teaching them to throw stones at a Jew, and one little urchin would, with the greatest coolness, waddle up to the man and literally spit upon his Jewish gabardine. To all this the Jew is obliged to submit. It would be more than his life was worth to offer to strike a Mohammedan." 199. In the middle of the 19th century, J.J. Benjamin wrote about the life of Persian Jews, describing conditions and beliefs that went back to the 16th century. They are obliged to live in a separate part of town, under the pretext of their being unclean. They are treated with the greatest severity, and should they enter a street, inhabited by Musulmans, they are pelted by the boys and mobs with stones and dirt. 200. In Jerusalem at least, conditions for some Jews improved. Moses Montefiore, on his 7th visit in 1875, noted that fine new buildings had sprung up, and surely we're approaching the time to witness God's shallowed promise unto Zion. Muslim and Christian Arabs participated in Purim and Passover, Arabs called the Sephardi's Jews, sons of Arabs. The ulama and the rabbis offered joint prayers for rain in time of drought. 201. At the time of the Dreyfus trial in France, Muslim comments usually favored the persecuted Jew against his Christian persecutors. 202. Secular or racial antisemitism. Title page of the second edition of Das Judentum in der Musik, published in 1869 and 1850. The German composer Richard Wagner, who has been called the inventor of modern antisemitism. 203. Published Das Judentum in der Musik, roughly Jewishness in music. 203. Under a pseudonym in the Neue Schrift für Musik. The Essay began as an attack on Jewish composers, particularly Wagner's contemporaries and rivals, Felix Mendelssohn and Giacomo Meyerbeer, but expanded to accuse Jews of being a harmful and alien element in German culture, who corrupted morals and were in fact parasites incapable of creating truly German art. The crew caused the manipulation and control by the Jews of the Monikonomis at Smiley. 203. According to the present constitution of this world, the Jew in truth is already more than emancipated, he rules, and will rule, so long as money remains the power before which all our doings and our dealings lose their force. 203. Although originally published anonymously, when the essay was republished 19 years later, in 1869, The concept of the corrupting Jew had become so widely held that Wagner's name was affixed to it. 203. Antisemitism can also be found in many of the Grimm's fairy tales by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, published from 1812 to 1857. It is mainly characterized by Jews being the villain of a story, such as in The Good Bargain, Der Gute Handel, and The Jew Among Thorns, Der Jude in Dorn. The middle 19th century saw continued official harassment of the Jews, especially in Eastern Europe under Chavist influence. For example, in 1846, 80 Jews approached the governor in Warsaw to retain the right to wear their traditional dress, but were immediately rebuffed by having their hair and beards forcefully cut, at their own expense. 204. Even such influential figures as Walt Whitman tolerated bigotry toward the Jews in America. During his time as editor of the Brooklyn Eagle, 1846-1848, the newspaper published historical sketches casting Jews in a bad light. 205. The Dreyfus Affair was an infamous antisemitic event of the late 19th century and early 20th century. Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish artillery captain in the French army, was accused in 1894 of passing secrets to the Germans. As a result of these charges, Dreyfus was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment on Devil's Island. The actual spy, Marie-Charles Esterhazy, was acquitted. The event caused great uproar among the French, with the public choosing sides on the issue of whether Dreyfus was actually guilty or. Antisemitic agitators in Paris burn an effigy of Mathieu Dreyfus during the Dreyfus Affair. Émile Zola accused the army of corrupting the French justice system. However, general consensus held that Dreyfus was guilty. 80% of the press in France condemned him. This attitude among the majority of the French population reveals the underlying antisemitism of the time period. 206. Adolf Stoecker, 1835-1909. The Lutheran court chaplain to Kaiser Wilhelm I, founded in 1878 an anti-Semitic, anti-liberal political party called the Christian Social Party. 207, 208. This party always remained small, and its support dwindled after Stoecker's death, with most of its members eventually joining larger conservative groups such as the German National People's Party. Some scholars view Karl Marx's essay on the Jewish question as antisemitic, and argue that he often used antisemitic epithets in his published and private writings. 209, 210, 211. These scholars argue that Marx equated Judaism with capitalism in his essay, helping to spread that idea. Some further argue that the essay influenced National Socialist, as well as Soviet and Arab antisemitism. 212, 213, 214. Marx himself had Jewish ancestry, and Albert Lindemann and Chaim Maccoby have suggested that he was embarrassed by it. 215, 216. Others argue that Marx consistently supported Prussian Jewish communities' struggles to achieve equal political rights. These scholars argue that On the Jewish Question is a critique of Bruno Bauer's arguments that Jews must convert to Christianity before being emancipated, and is more generally a critique of liberal rights discourses and capitalism. 217, 218, 219, 220. Ian Hampson wrote that this work, On the Jewish Question, has been cited as evidence for Marx's supposed antisemitism, but only the most superficial reading of it could sustain such an interpretation. 221. David McClellan and Francis Wien argue that readers should interpret On the Jewish Question in the deeper context of Marx's debates with Bruno Bauer, author of The Jewish Question, about Jewish emancipation in Germany. Wien says that those critics, who see this as a foretaste of Mein Kampf, overlook one essential point, in spite of the clumsy phraseology and crude stereotyping. The essay was actually written as a defense of the Jews. It was a retort to Bruno Bauer, who had argued that Jews should not be granted full civic rights and freedoms unless they were baptized as Christians. 222. According to McClellan, Marx used the word Judentum colloquially, as meaning commerce, arguing that Germans must be emancipated from the capitalist mode of production, not Judaism or Jews in particular. McClellan concludes that readers should interpret the essay's second half as an extended pun at Bauer's expense. 223. 20th